So there are some foods that are always inflammatory. And then there are other foods that are sometimes inflammatory, depending on the person and what's going on with them. Or there's a bigger conversation explaining the nature of how that food is inflammatory. So if we start with a real simple one, okay? And then we'll sort of summarize it into a very sort of organized protocol for you. Gluten. So you all have a packet in front of you that's called Eliminating Gluten. It's a resource tool. It's a tool that outlines and defines what gluten is, and it provides you with resources like cookbooks and websites and blogs and things that gives you all kinds of different recipes. But let me define for you what gluten is. Gluten is a grain. It's really a protein. Gluten is a protein that's found in certain types of grains, and it's considered to be a pro-inflammatory grain protein. Gluten is found in wheat, rye, and barley, and it's oftentimes found in oats. A lot of times, for those of you that have started to get onto the gluten-free kick, or the movement, as my father-in-law likes to call it, very lovingly, you'll see gluten-free oats. You know, like Bob Red Mill. Bob's Red Mill has gluten-free oats. And the reason why that's such an important distinction is if you think about the culture of farming, right, you have a lot of different types of grain that can be farmed simultaneously in neighboring farms, and they share a lot of the same farming equipment and the same distributor materials and, you know, buckets and all that kind of stuff that can all be contaminated. And gluten, if you think about someone that has celiac disease, which is a disease where it's really truly a poison when you eat gluten, more in an acute sense, they really can't have any, not even a speck, right? But for the rest of us that don't have celiac, it's still inflammatory. If we're gluten-free for a period of time and we're feeling better and we have more energy and we go out to a restaurant, we eat something, we don't realize that there's gluten in it, or maybe we do and we choose to eat it anyway, we feel sluggish immediately. And there's a reason for that, right? So it's a learning process of knowing what to ask. But essentially, it can be another name. So gluten can be called, or the word spelt. Spelt is a type of sprouted wheat. So that means there's gluten in that. There's a bunch of grains that are other names for gluten. But there's also a lot of grains that are not gluten, right? Like rice, you know, wild rice, you know, brown rice, white rice. There's a lot of different, the rice are not glutinous. There's corn, there's potato, there's lots of starches that we could talk about that are not gluten. They're gluten-free. And a lot of the growing gluten-free products out there are made with some of these different types of ingredients. So gluten today is much easier to avoid than yesterday. I mean, I've been gluten-free for probably about 10-15 years, and at the time when we started, I mean, there was not a lot of products, and they were awful. They were really stale and dry and dense, and it was one of those things that's like, why bother? But today, gluten-free is definitely not a weight loss diet, because there's so many alternatives. There's so many substitutes that are really quite yummy, like the cake in the kitchen. Yeah, very, very yummy. So knowing that that's a beginning, okay?